Um, Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the reading of the Monetary Policy Statement for August 2025. I'll start with introductions. In the center of the table is Mr. Michael Ating Ego, the Governor Bank of Uganda. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Kenneth.
On the governor's right is the Deputy Governor Bank of Uganda, Professor Augustus Nwagaba. You're most welcome, Deputy Governor. On the extreme right is Mr. David Kalyango, the Executive Director, Supervision. You're most welcome. On the left of the Governor is the Executive Director, Research, Dr. Adam Mugume. You're most welcome, Dr. Adam Mugume. My name is Kenneth Egesa. I'm the Director, Public Relations and Communications Department. We will start with the reading of the Monetary Policy Statement by the Governor, after which he will take your questions together with his team. And after the questions, we will have a translation to Luganda. Governor, you're welcome to read the statement.
Thank you, Kenneth. A very good afternoon to our viewers and listeners. Welcome to the reading of the August 2025 Monetary Policy Statement. On August 12, 2025, the Monetary Policy Committee, MPS of the Bank of Uganda, maintained the central bank rate, CBR, at 9.75%, reflecting persistent global economic uncertainty stemming from evolving trade dynamics and recurring geopolitical tensions. The financial year 2024-25 was characterized by macroeconomic stability, which was reinforced by effective coordination between monetary and fiscal policies. This coordination has helped anchor investor confidence and maintain stability despite a volatile and uncertain external environment. Over the past 12 months, annual headline and core inflation averaged 3.4% and 3.9% respectively, remaining below the medium-term target of 5%. This subdued inflation has been supported by prudent monetary policy, a stable exchange rate, global disinflation, and favorable food and energy prices. In July 2025, year-on-year headline and core inflation declined slightly to 3.8% and 4.1% respectively, from 3.9% and 4.2% in June 2025. The decline was primarily driven by lower inflation in food crop and services, particularly passenger transport. The inflation outlook remains broadly similar to the May 2025 forecast, with slightly lower projections in the near term due to a more stable exchange rate and declining global oil prices. Core inflation is projected to range between 4.5% and 4.8% in financial year 2025-26, compared to between 4.5% and 5% in the previous forecast rounds, and is expected to stabilize around the medium-term target of 5%. This outlook is supported by a cautious monetary policy amidst elevated uncertainty, stable exchange rate conditions, improved food supply, and lower global oil prices. This outlook is subject to risks. The downside risks include a stronger shilling, subdued domestic and global demand, and declining oil prices. Conversely, upside risks stem from exchange rate depreciation, rising import costs due to trade barriers, increased government spending, and adverse weather conditions. Overall, while inflation is contained, vigilance is warranted given the potential for upward pressures. Domestic economic activity has remained resilient. High-frequency indicators show continued dynamism in exports and imports, and confidence indices suggest limited impact from external uncertainties. According to the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, UBOS, real GDP growth for the financial year 2024/25 is estimated at 6.3%, up from 6.1% in the previous fiscal year. This growth is supported by low inflation, exchange rate stability, export expansion, and strategic government investments, including in infrastructure. Real GDP is projected at 6% to 6.5% in financial year 2025/26, with further strengthening anticipated in the medium term. This outlook is underpinned by sustained prudent monetary policy, targeted government initiatives to stimulate growth, rising agricultural output, and increased investments in the extractive sector, all aimed at continued implementation of the 10-fold growth strategy. Growth prospects are favorable, yet subject to downside risks such as falling commodity prices, global supply chain disruptions, tighter financing conditions, and adverse weather. However, the economy could grow faster if geopolitical tensions ease, infrastructure investments increases further, and business sentiments improve. Overall, the medium-term growth outlook remains positive, supported by strategic government initiatives and the resilient domestic activity. So given the global uncertainties and the elevated risk to inflation, the MPC has opted for a cautious monetary policy stance, maintaining the CBR at 9.75%. The CBR bonds remain at plus minus 2 percentage points, with the rate discounts and the bank rates set at 3 and 4 percentage points above the CBR, respectively, resulting into a discount rate of 12.75% and a bank rate of 13.75%. The MPC considers the current CBR level appropriate for controlling inflation while supporting economic growth and socio-economic transformation. Future adjustments to the CBR will be guided by the incoming data and ongoing assessments of the evolving risk environment. Viewers and listeners, that marks the end of the reading of the monetary policy statement for the month of August 2025. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Governor, for the statement. We will now take questions. I invite you to raise your hand and introduce the media house you're representing and yourself, and then go straight to the question. We also invite our viewers on LinkedIn, X, YouTube, and Microsoft Teams to type your questions in the comment section, where we will pick them up and have responses provided. So we'll start with those in the room. Please go ahead. You can use the microphone.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Governor, for the presentation. My name is Ali Twaha from New Vision. Just 4 quick questions. In your statement, you highlighted really the strength of the shilling being one of those issues in the economy. When you look over the last 14 months, the currency has really gained against the dollar. And when we reverse about 2 years ago, the shilling did weaken to around 3,950, around there. And I think there was a bit of intervention in the market. Right now, the shilling is trading at about 3.5 something, and its strength is sort of a worry as well for the market, depending on which side you're playing at. So, in your projections, at what level do you see it as being too strong that it might warrant an intervention, maybe to save some businesses in the economy? The other is on an update, really, in terms of what we saw in the primary market during the Wednesday auction. Government did leave quite a bit of money on the table. Of course, there was a bit of debate in the media on what's really happening, because the results that came out, especially on our longest tenor, the 25-year bond, the new one, kind of catching the market by surprise in terms of the yield that the market offered. So just give us a bit of insight on what you're seeing, but also why did government leave so much money on the table? What signals are you trying to send the market? The other is on last week I did attend the Uganda Bankers Conference, and you did quite give a good presentation in terms of the remittance space and the intervention the Bank of Uganda is playing. You did highlight the national payment switch being one of those interventions that will ease the cost of sending money. But if you Google right now about the national payment switch, most likely Google gives you of BOU plans to introduce the national payment switch. The discussion is not really on what is on ground right now. The discussion between banks, what are they talking about? Is there a halt on establishing this switch? Really, we don't know much of what's going on, apart from the mention that the national payment switch is coming and there are ongoing talks between stockholders. We would like more detail, if you could allow, Mr. Governor. The last one is on the gold reserve. I did attend also your presentation during the Misoeconomics conference that we had a few months ago, and you gave highlights. There was also news that you did put out a procurement, a bid, sort of looking for suppliers, I think in April. I mean, what updates are there regarding that as well for the market? Thanks a lot.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Wadulo Arnold Mark.
Maybe can we have a response, because there were several questions, then we'll come back to you immediately after.
Okay, now maybe you wait a bit, because Ali has asked quite a mouthful, so let's first exhaust those. Okay, thank you for your patience. Yes, Ali, yes. The currency has been appreciating, you're right, for a long period, to quote your statement, for 14 months, so you say. And you say that one time it had tied 3950. And I want to believe that you are talking about February last year. And maybe to correct you, Bank of Uganda did not intervene in the market at the time. We allowed the currency to depreciate from where it was, from about 3.7. It was just shy of 4,000. Bank of Uganda last intervened in the foreign exchange market on this on the sell side in the first week of June 2022. So why is the currency appreciating? There are several factors that are explaining the appreciation of the currency. First and foremost, I'll start with the domestic factors. We, as you're aware, we have recorded quite strong exports, particularly in the financial year 24-25. And this is linked to the improved coffee prices and also cocoa prices, accompanied by volume increases in the case of coffee. So that impact alone has enabled us to earn slightly over $2 billion in terms of coffee exports. And then we have also had a prudent monetary policy that has maintained confidence and has attracted a number of offshore players into our markets, particularly to participate in the government securities. The prudent monetary policy that has ensured that inflation has remained low and stable itself is causing more inflows to come. And then we have also undertaken a number of reforms in the FX market, particularly strengthening what we call the swap market, where a number of players are increasing in the activity. So what this is doing is that it is relieving pressure from the spot market into now the FX market, into the swap market. Because initially, everybody made their demands by going to the spot market to buy FX if I wanted it. But now I can go to the swap market, exchange my shillings for dollars if I'm expecting dollars to come maybe next week. So I'm relieving pressure from the spot market. And then, of course, the other thing is that the increased offers of government securities in the market has attracted a number of offshore players. And when they come with dollars, exchange it for shillings to participate in the government securities market. But more fundamentally is the dollar has been weakening world over. It has lost strength against a number of hard currencies. So that's what the Uganda shilling is partly picking as well, the weakening of the US dollar. So that largely explains why the currency has been strengthening. But what you also need to know is that the currency is market determined, and we do little to interfere with that market determined exchange rate. So it is basically the fundamentals that are driving the currency where it is. And you're right, there are some losers who will result, particularly the exporters, because they're getting fewer shillings for every $1 that they're getting. But we need to address it from another side. How do we lower the overall cost of doing business? The exchange rate is only one tool, but we need to look at a broader aspect, because there are a number of factors that affect the cost of doing business, that affect the cost of exporters. What are we doing about those? Take, for example, the cost of energy, the cost of transport and labor and what have you, and all the inputs that go into the production of exports. So we need to have a conversation on those factors rather than just only focusing on the exchange rate, because the exchange rate is market determined. We cannot continue intervening because we want to prop up the exporter. That means we will be buying more currency, injecting more shillings into the economy, and that can also prove to be inflationary if we don't mop it. And if we mop it, we shall cause the interest rates even to go much higher. So you need to strike that balance. How do you then ensure that you minimize the losses by pursuing prudent policies? Now, you talked about the last auction. Again, that last auction, particularly the T-bond auction, I think the best I can tell you is that the auction prices are determined by the market forces. But it is the prerogative of the government. The government reserves the right to accept or reject these prices based on the cost considerations. So that is really a fiscal issue, because also you don't want very, very expensive yields that will affect the government budget. So that's why government reserves the right to accept or reject these prices. Then you asked about the diaspora bond. Yes, we are trying to broaden the products under the fixed income market. Currently, we have been relying largely on government securities as fixed income products. But now we want to broaden the products in there. And some of the products that we're thinking of introducing in the market are things like diaspora bonds, sukuk bonds, green bonds, and infrastructure bonds. And speaking to your question, the diaspora bond, of course, is one thing that we are considering, but we are trying to come up with a diaspora policy that will guide us in terms of how we're going to issue this bond. There are a number of things that you need to be prepared with before you issue that bond. First, you need to identify what kind of projects is the diaspora bond going to finance, and to what extent is the diaspora community willing to participate in that. What is the rate of return on that project? What is it going to do in terms of, will that project be acceptable to the diaspora? So there are all the things that we need to understand, and also what is the propensity of the diaspora to be able to take up that offer, because we've seen some countries that have issued diaspora bonds, or they issue a certain amount, but then the participation is quite low. So we are trying to do a market analysis after the diaspora policy has come out to identify the project, how much can be supported by the diaspora. We look at those inflows that are coming to Uganda. Are they for consumption? Are they for investment? Because if you look at most of the diaspora flows, a large percentage is going to help the households for their daily consumption, and the rest of it goes for things like education and for health. So we need to understand how much of that can be channeled into investment. So we need really to have a clear understanding. But the intent is there, because we really want to structure this bond to see how the diaspora community can contribute to our development. So it is something that we're working on. And then in terms of, did you ask a question about gold, if I recall? Yes, you're right. We were at the tail end of the procurement process of it, that time that you referred to, and the gold purchase program is progressing steadily, and it is in its final stages, and this is going to be a pilot project. It will run for about 2-3 years before we go to a fully blown up gold purchase, because we want to learn some lessons from this pilot. That what does it involve? What are some of the things that we need to put in place before we go full blast? But we think that it will be coming out very shortly. There are a few things that we're trying to finalize. So you're right, the procurement process is of course being undertaken in accordance to the procurement guidelines. And on the national payment switch, correct again, there are a number of stakeholders that we are consulting. And you see, when you're consulting stakeholders, you need to build a consensus. And sometimes consensus building is not very fast, because you need to bring everybody on board to address all the various interests in it. So the payment switch is on track, and we are finalizing it with the concerned stakeholders. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Within there, you answered a big chunk of my question, but maybe just to still put it there directly. My name is Wadulo Arnold Mark. I'm a business reporter at Uganda Broadcasting Corporation and a news anchor. Considering the falling dollar index having one of the worst 6 months of the year in a very long time. In July, I think it really hit. It was really low compared to, I think it was last that time in the 1970s. Last low like that. I think Al Jazeera also released a report in that regard, and I followed up on that tip. So without looking like, without maybe looking like I'm asking you to give us hints, or what is central bank doing in both the short run and in the long run? Because I know this is primarily because of Trump's policies right now. Trump's policies on his big, beautiful bill, like he calls it. It's distorted so many markets. What are we looking at in both the short term and in the long term to see that, one, we leverage some of the circumstances, but also deflect any negative or potential spillovers that might come into our economy? It has affected remittances, and I see that if we are watchful in the long run, there could also be some wins for us. So just some insights on that. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Arnold. I'm going to ask Adam to come in on that, then I will wrap it up. Adam, can you comment on that, please?
I think just to emphasize what the governor had said. First, let us first agree that the dollar is market determined. If it moves up or down, there are losers and there are people who will gain. Currently, if you are 80% of our imports, for example, are raw and capital goods, 20% are consumer goods. So a manufacturing firm that imports raw materials or capital obviously benefits. And as the governor said, those who are exporting, including also exporting services, including remittances, obviously lose out. So the question therefore is, if there are market forces, at any given time, the price will hurt some and will benefit the others. So that's why we emphasize macroeconomic stability. So long as the trend or they have macroeconomic stability in whichever direction, whether it is up and down, then we are sure that whatever happens, come medium term or long term, that will not really affect the economy, provided macroeconomic stability is maintained. So to answer your question, therefore, the market determined exchange rate means that at any given time, whether they are gainers or losers, at the end of the day, the impact on growth and other elements of the stability are really not affected because everything is market determined. So basically, we don't see any situation where the central bank will come in to lean against the wind of where the currency is moving. That would be a disaster. Because number one, it will eventually correct. Trump will not be there forever. Probably, so long as the dollar index has come down, it will eventually also come up. So I think we have to be able to put that into perspective also. Thank you.
Okay, Gus, do you want to add something before I wind it up?
I think on the question of the balance between where the currency should be, what should be do you want to support the dollar when it increases, when it depreciates, when it appreciates? The answer is that the role of this central bank, the mandate of this central bank is to maintain stability of the financial system, which is to maintain price stability and sound financial system. And in that maintaining of let's talk about the maintaining of the price stability. What for us we focus on is to ensure that both importers, for us we are looking at both interests. If you say the shilling appreciates, and that's very good for the country, that's what everybody would think, that you would need now intervene and make sure the dollar. But remember, we also have people who are exporting, also who are earning dollars. You don't also want them to lose. But also you have now importers who are also importing raw materials also in hard currency. So what the role of the central bank therefore is, the governor has said, is to maintain and balance those interests for both importers and exporters. In other words, for everybody who is in business. And we can assure you that the central bank, as the governor has said, is playing that role very, very well. Our shilling currently is extremely strong, as you have seen, and we want to maintain that strength because, of course, we don't want to also play into the hands of having a shilling that is not performing. Then I think the last one on the, I think on what Adam has said on the geopolitical tensions, issues of the Trump policies and tariff regime. Trump has also done what my brother here is calling the OBBB, which is currently the act. It has been a one big, beautiful bill. It is now one big, beautiful act. And what this act is saying, it has 8 elements, and one of the most one which you are interested in here in our economy here is that there's been a cut in taxes. Remember, Trump had also cut the taxes earlier, and this requires therefore financing of that deficit. It is currently going to be around 3.4 trillion US dollars. We're talking about US dollars, not billion, 3.4 trillion. What does this mean? It also can affect us, you are right, in terms of the portfolio investors, the offshore investors, because those people also invest here in our bonds. So if they hear that now there is a lot of, if you increase the fiscal deficit, you increase appetite for people to invest there, not here. And also you can correctly have people migrating from our bond market to there. But what the beauty is, we are not only depending on the American market or on one single market. We have diversified our inflows. The governor has told you the coffee, 2.1 billion. We have gold, 3.8 billion. We have remittances, 1.4 billion. We have quite a number of cocoa. So the economy here currently is well diversified and balanced, to the extent that we are really not very much worried about what happens in one subsector. So we can argue that the economy is well performing, it is balanced, it is interested in making sure that there is economic activity and business, and the currency is performing, which is for the fact it is doing so. How do you know it? You need to do that what happens in other currencies, and also we are really controlling inflation as well as the foreign exchange market because of those fundamentals we have mentioned. So we are not very much worried really that when this is not performing, then we are likely to suffer very much from inflows. That's not going to happen because of the economy that is very highly diversified in many areas. I think this is what I wanted to emphasize from what the governor has very well ably explained. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Augusta. So, Arnold, in summary, the big beautiful bill, which is not the big beautiful act, will certainly have some implications for Uganda. Obvious one, look at the immigration policies in that. What does it mean for our remittances? Are we going to continue growing remittances from the US the way that we've been receiving those remittances? Maybe not. But the balancing act is that we are seeing the Middle Eastern corridor contribution to remittance also increasing in the recent past. So maybe it could slightly offset what the bill is giving us, or what that act is giving us. And then, depending on what happens to interest rates in the US, if that bill produces strong growth in the US and it tends to be inflationary, then the Fed might raise the interest rates in the near term if it's accompanied by strong growth, which can certainly become inflationary. Then it could affect us in several ways. Deputy Governor has talked about what does it mean for portfolio flows, what does it mean for foreign direct investment that would have otherwise come to this country, because money is competing for returns, for safety. So depending on what happens, it could affect us through FDI and portfolio flows. And then, of course, the other one has got to do with the reduction in aid, which we have already witnessed. For example, USAID has cut quite some significant support to Uganda. So to me, that is a short-term thing. But I think we've handled that one quite well so far. Again, we need to be proactive to deal with the uncertainties as they emerge. And then, of course, those issues like reduced portfolio flows, higher costs of borrowing, if it leads to the dollar strengthening, we will have to allow the currency to depreciate, to reflect the market fundamentals. So those long-run consequences, we'll deal with them. There's a part that the central bank can play. There's a part that the fiscal authorities can play. Like we mentioned that in 24-25, macroeconomic stability was achieved as a result of effective coordination of monetary and fiscal policies. So it will take the two to work together to deal with the consequences of this act. Thank you.
Let me read one from LinkedIn, and then you can come in with the other. So, Governor, there is a question from Monica Nahabwe on LinkedIn, and I'll read it as it is. Given the increasing climate-related shocks to food supply in Uganda, is the bank considering integrating climate risk into its monetary policy models or inflation forecasts? You can come in with your question as well so that they are taken together.
Governor, my name is Michael Baleke. I work for CGTN. On the external risks, I know you have already talked about the geopolitics. We still have a war in Sudan, a conflict in South Sudan. We have instability in Eastern Congo. Even when the president ordered for the borders to be opened, the traders are still opting to go the longer way through Rwanda. We have economic tightening in Tanzania for small businesses, and then we know Kenya and all the other stuff. What are the most significant external threats to Uganda's macroeconomic stability right now? And how are these reflected in your August economic models? Secondly, you have talked about the outlook is underpinned by cautious, prudent monetary policy. What indicators would signal that it is safe to shift towards a more accommodative, stance without risking inflation? And lastly, Governor, this is about mobile money fraud. Just to let you know, there's a campaign ongoing online about the civic group called Agora to stop Airtel theft, in which members of the public are sharing stories of service providers, including Airtel Uganda, that they may be complicit. The campaign is urging regulators like Bank of Uganda and UCC to take action. They are saying that some of the service provider staff may be involved in this fraud. Would like to know whether you have investigated these claims and what steps you have taken probably to stop this going on. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Monica. Monica, your question was to do with climate-related shocks and its impact on monetary policy. Adam, why don't I ask you to speak to that, and I'll come into.
Yes, Monica, that is a valid question, and we do indeed incorporate climate risks into our models. For example, in both for inflation and also economic activity, we normally use the volatility of the volatility of the rainfall patterns as part of the variables we incorporate in terms of seeing how GDP is likely to evolve, but also inflation. Going forward, we are also going to incorporate temperatures. So a combination of rainfall and temperatures in terms of generating forecast and also both inflation and also economic activity. So we already are doing that.
Thank you, Adam. And maybe Monica, not only monetary policy is affected by climate-related shocks, it also affects the financial sector stability. So maybe let me ask David to say something about its impact on financial sector stability.
Yeah, thank you, Governor. Indeed, it is true that climate risk affects financial sector stability. In this regard, the Bank of Uganda has come up with draft regulations or guidelines to guide how institutions are going to respond to climate-related risk. Once these are approved, they will be circulated on our website, and you'll have opportunity to look at them, which require banks to integrate climate risk assessment in all their operations, be they lending, be it a creditor assessment, so that we fully account for climate-related risk in as far as it affects the financial sector stability. Thank you, Governor.
All right, thank you. And on top of that, we recently rolled out what we call environmental social governance framework, which all the supervised financial institutions are now implementing. And that aspect of environment, we are emphasizing it so much that your lending should be very mindful of the environment that we're operating in. We have the commercial banks and the other supervised financial institutions that the financial sector can only be sustainable if the environment in which they are operating is sustainable. So we will be asking them to demonstrate to us how they are making sure that they are financing sustainability in their lending operations. Now, Michael, let me come to your question about the regional political risks. Yes, you're right. There are concerns about, you called it geopolitics in the region. We know what's happening in the DRC, what's happening in South Sudan. And of course, the impression out there is that it could certainly affect our export markets. But let me just emphasize the fact that we don't have much evidence right now that, take for example, our exports to Congo have come down significantly. I'm not aware of it. Maybe Adam can actually beef that up. But we continue to export to the DRC. We continue to export to South Sudan. But having said that, I'm not ruling it out that if there is increased tension in this area, that it might affect our export. But so far, there's not much anecdotal evidence to suggest so. If anything, the real external threats that I'm seeing are more of the geopolitics that we're seeing in some areas. So take, for example, the wars that we're seeing in the Middle East. If they were to spill over to the region, what is the impact of that on the oil prices? You know that the Suez Canal is a major trading transport corridor. What would happen if that corridor became unsafe? It would mean that ships would have to use a much longer route, which would affect the transportation costs. And that means that for every 1 unit of import or export that you are transacting in, you are paying more for transport. And then, of course, there's also the disruption of the supply chains, right, which might affect our capacity to import not only the quantities but also the prices. So to me, those are the much more serious external threats that I am looking at. And beyond that is what will happen to the global financial system if interest rates in advanced economies go north, if they increase, it will increase also the cost at which we are borrowing and availability of those that financing, which we see as critical also in supporting our own growth objectives here. So to me, those are the real things without underplaying, of course, what's happening in the region. But so far, I am yet to get anecdotal evidence that we have significantly reduced our exports to the region as a result of that. But maybe Adam, you might be having some better numbers on that.
Governor, you are right. I think looking at the numbers, I think for the financial year that ended June, our trade within the East African region came in, both formal and informal, what we call ICBT, came in at, I think, $2.8 billion. We exported goods 10.6 billion, 2.8 were within the East African region and led by DRC, Kenya, and South Sudan, Rwanda, and lastly Rwanda and Burundi. So, and we don't, and I think that's the growth of around 20-something% compared to the previous year. So there is no evidence that actually within the region, although in some countries there is slight reduction, for example, Kenya and Tanzania and South Sudan, but overall it was just a marginal decline compared to the increase, for example, we see in exports going to DRC. Now, there is always an issue in the numbers. When you look at the formal trade, mainly with DRC, you see that either they are coming down or they are flat. But without looking at the informal side, because the goods to DRC, they don't go in bulk. They go in piecemeals. And I think you know the reason. And so when you look at the formal without looking at the informal, you'll find that actually the trade with DRC is either declining or flat. It is only when you put in the informal, because goods to DRC go in piecemeal, that you get a clear picture of the trade with DRC.
Okay, then Michael, so you asked a question about these, the Airtel and the UCC. I think the best that you can tell aggrieved customers, they're just encouraged to report any issues with their mobile money to their telco services, particularly their providers, for resolution. And in case they are not satisfied with the redress, they can also contact us in Bank of Uganda, particularly when it's going to deal with mobile money. We have direct communication here. He can give you the contact point. But I'm not aware of any cases that have been raised regarding the question that you raised that concern Bank of Uganda and have not been addressed. If there's anything, I would really want to take much interest in it, if you can give us more information.
What they are saying is they want the customers are saying they were saying Bank of Uganda should come in and address this. If you're investigating the claims that it's within the staff of the service providers that this theft and fraud is going on.
Okay, I agree with Michael, but we first need to understand the problem. So you first contact the data communication, and then we will assess the program here before that. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take a few more and then close. So please go ahead.
My name is Hakim Wampamba. I work with NBS TV. Balancing the act, the fiscal and the monetary. I said this at finance last month, and I said I didn't require to be an economist to know that it will first be cautious before it finally becomes contractionary. So, to the Bank of Uganda, are you concerned that our dear politicians are pumping more money into the economy, election financing? And if you're concerned, what is your level of concern? Because every politician that I know is spending, and those that aren't spending are planning to spend. So, in the wake of that, pumping and charging up the economy on the other side, on the fiscal side, politicians, and you, how is it going to be, and what sort of assurance do you have for Ugandans out there in terms of the impact of this? So the comment on your level of concern on election financing and spend as the regulator of the financial sector. Many thanks.
Sorry, you said you're Hakim? Oh?
Hakim.
Hakim. No, so Hakim, just be very clear about this. Are you talking about individual politicians who are pumping money to the economy? Or are you concerned about government expenditures in relation to... Look, let me answer that question in two parts. Let's look at the individual politicians who you say are pumping money to the economy. I need you to ask yourself the question, where are they getting their money from? If I have a house and I'm selling it for campaigning, somebody out there has got to buy the house. That is already currency in circulation. This is already money out there, right? So I'm selling the house. I'm getting money from Hakim because I want to become an MP. So I sell my house, you give me the money. Bank of Uganda has not increased any money supply at all. You have only redistributed money from me, from you, Hakim, to me, the politician who's campaigning. Now, I think what you need to ask is, what do I do with that money? If I'm going to distribute it, like you say, to the potential voters, right? What are they going to do with that money? Are they going to spend it for consumption or something? So yes, it is true that maybe they will jack up aggregate demand, particularly for that sector of the population that is benefiting. They could jack up that aggregate demand. But for us, we are concerned about the price level. The other day, we had some elections in July that were really, really competitively held. If money at all was spent, we would have seen it in the July inflation numbers. All right? So for Bank of Uganda, if inflation were to go up, it would do the needful. But we are aware that the money that's out there that is changing hands is not likely to create any inflation because there's money already in the system. So maybe how do the beneficiaries use that money? Remember, who are the ones who are benefiting and what are they going to spend it on? So that's one thing. Now, you come to the government, I think the government has given us its fiscal deficit that covers everything, and we have done our monetary policy formulation based on government expenditures for 25-26, right? So we know how much government is going to spend. We have put in place our tools ready to handle any government expenditures that are contained in the government budget. And we are delivering inflation of not more than 5% in the financial year 25-26, given the government expenditure that we have been given and the budget deficit and its financing. So really, as a central bank, unless it's something that we do not know, we don't think it's going to cause inflation to go higher than we are projected.
Okay, we'll close with you, Vincent. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Kenneth. Governor, thank you so much. My name is Vincent Kasozi. I am the news editor. Yes, I'm head of news at Sanyu FM. Your last question, your last answer involved calculations and forecasting, especially with his question regarding inflationary pressure. We're living in one of the most advanced technological eras, especially with the rise of AI. We're moving to artificial general intelligence on the way to superhuman intelligence. Of course, there are analysts who are doomsdayers and say that there's going to be a lot of upsets, there's going to be a lot of unrest. And we're already seeing it with jobs being lost. And Uganda will not be spared. My question is to do with your strategic plan, your forecasting, as these technologies come on board. And there's an analyst who predicted that in the next 12 years, there might be a dystopia and people might have to be put on universal basic income. So how do you look at these technologies and how they're going to affect your forecasting for macroeconomic stability, especially in your strategic plan?
Vincent, when I was reading the monetary policy statement, my last paragraph, all right, said that the MPC considers the current CBR level appropriate for controlling inflation while supporting economic growth and socioeconomic transformations. Full stop. Now, mark this last sentence. Future adjustments to the CBR will be guided by incoming data. Yeah, AI can do whatever it wants, right? But the data will come out. And that is what is going to guide us as we formulate monetary policy. But having said that, it's not that we're oblivious to what technology is going to do in the medium to long term. We are thinking of it as well. In fact, if you look at the Bank of Uganda strategic plan for 22 to 27, the digitalization of the systems in Bank of Uganda is taking a center stage. We are trying to see how we can move into big data analytics. We are trying to see how we can introduce AI in our operations, machine learning into our operations, and see how those tools can help us in terms of formulating monetary and financial sector policies. So we are mindful of what you said. But when it comes to the conduct of monetary policy, we will be guided by the incoming data rather than something speculative that 2 years down the road this is going to happen. We will take note of that. But whatever is going to happen, some data, at least early warning data can come as a result of the technology that you're talking about. And we will consider the data for our policy formulation. I don't know whether I've answered your question.
Thank you, Governor. Any closing remarks or final takeaways for our listeners out there before we close?
Okay. Again, our listeners, again, we want to thank you for understanding the kind of environment that we have been operating in. It's been very challenging. We do understand it. We've been tight in as far as our monetary policy is concerned, because we've been wanting to ensure that we maintain macroeconomic stability. Because the cost of not having macroeconomic stability is much higher than if we just let go in terms of availability of money through loose monetary policy. So, just to assure you that while we know that there's a lot of uncertainty out there, the central bank will do whatever it takes to ensure that we, to a large extent, will try to maintain macroeconomic stability, even in the face of uncertainties and the challenges that are likely to come. We faced these things before, we've navigated through it, and we will continue doing that. So I just want to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Governor. Thank you very much, Deputy Governor, Executive Director Supervision, Executive Director Research. Viewers and listeners, we've come to the end of the reading of the Monetary Policy Statement for August 2025. Bassebo ne bannyabo, tugenda kukyusa olulimi tudde mu Luganda. Mwami Sonko agenda okutaputa statement ya Governor eya August 2025. Mwami Sonko.
Okay. Statement ya Governor ekwata ku byensimbi ey'omwezi ogw'omunaana 2025. Akakiiko akakola ku byensimbi oba ke tuyita mu luzungu Monetary Policy Committee kasazeewo okusigaza amagoba ge twakazaako Central Bank Rate ku bitundu 9.75 buli 100, nga kino kyesigamiziddwa ku butabanguko obuli mu byenfuna mu nsi yonna oluvannyuma lw'ebyobusuubuzi okugyamu emirerembe awamu n'obukuubagano obuli mu mawanga okutwaliza awamu. Gavana atangaazizza nti omwaka ogw'ebyensimbi ogwayita 2024-2025 gwalimu obutebenkevu nga kino kyesigamiziddwa ku nkolagana ennungi eriwo wakati wa Banka Enkulu eya Uganda ne Minisitule y'ebyensimbi n'enteekateeka ez'enjawulo ze bafujjirira. Gavana n'ayongerako n'atangaaza nti enkolagana eyo ereese bamusigansimbi okwesiga ebyenfuna mu ggwanga lyattu Uganda ate n'okuteekawo obutabanguko wadde nga tuli mu mayengo okuva ebweru w'eggwanga nga bwe tuganokodde waggulu awo. Gavana n'atangaaza nti myezi 12 egiyise enkyukakyuka y'emiwendo gy'ebintu ebadde ku bitundu 3.4 buli 100, nga kino kyesigamiziddwa ku nkola ennungi ey'emirimu mu Banka Enkulu eya Uganda mu nteekateeka y'ebyensimbi mu luzungu gye tuyita monetary policy. Ensimbi ya Uganda okubanga yenywezezza bw'ogigeraageranya n'ey'Amerika okutwaliza awamu enkyukakyuka y'ebintu mu nsi yonna egenze ekkakkana ate n'ebbeeyi ennungi ey'emmere n'ey'amafuta okutwaliza awamu n'ey'amasannyalaze. N'anokolayo nti mwezi ogw'omusanvu 2025 enkyukakyuka y'emiwendo gy'ebintu ebadde bitundu 3.8 buli 100, nga kino kisinzidde kuba nti okutwaliza awamu tulabye nti emmere erimwa n'ebyemikono ebyo bigenze bikira ddala, n'anokolayo n'ebyentambula ebisinze okukkakkanya enkyukakyuka y'emiwendo gy'ebintu mu mwezi ogw'omusanvu. Gavana n'atangaaza nti bw'atunulako mu maaso bw'ogeraageranya enteebereza y'enkyukakyuka y'emiwendo gy'ebintu mu mwezi guno ogw'omunaana n'omwezi ogwaggwa ogwokutaano 2025 tewali nnyo kikyuseeko, nga kino kyesigamiziddwa kuba nti siringi ya Uganda ebadde ekyenywereza eddala bw'ogigeraageranyiriza amawanga amalala awamu n'okuba nti ebbeeyi y'amafuta katale k'ensi yonna egenze ekkirira. Era kino n'alaga nti kyesigamiziddwa ku nkola ey'emirimu emirungi oba gye twakazizaako monetary policy waggulu, olwadde nga tulabyemu obutabanguko mu nsi yonna. Ensimbi ya Uganda okubanga ekyali nnywevu, ebyemmere okubanga biri bulungi okutwaliza n'awamu n'amafuta akatale k'ensi yonna okukkakkana. Naye gavana n'anokolayo n'agamba nti wayinza okubeerawo ebigireetera okweyongerera ddala oba enkyukakyuka y'emiwendo gy'ebintu okweyongera okukkakkanako okuva bwe bagiteebereza wakati w'ebitundu 4 n'obutundutundu 5 buli 100 paka ku bitundu 4 n'obutundutundu 8 buli 100 mwaka gw'ebyensimbi 2025-2026, nga kino kyesigamizza singa siringi ya Uganda yeeyongera okwenyeza bw'ogigeraageranya ku ddoola ya Amerika, ne tulaba nti obwetaavu bw'ebintu mu Uganda n'okutwaliza mu nsi yonna bukkakkana ate n'ebbeeyi y'amafuta yeeyongera okukka. Ekyo kiyinza okwogerera ddala okukkiriza enkyukakyuka y'emiwendo gy'ebintu. Gavana n'anokolayo nti naye enkyukakyuka y'emiwendo gy'ebintu ekyasobola okulinnya singa essiringi ya Uganda esereba bw'ogigeraageranya n'ez'amawanga amalala, tweyongera oba ebbeeyi y'ebintu bye tugula ebweru w'eggwanga byeyongera oluvannyuma lw'obutabanguko obuli mu by'obusuubuzi, ensaasaanya ya gavumenti yeeyongerako n'embeera y'obudde singa eyonooneka. Bannaffe aba Uganda Bureau of Statistics batangaazizza nti mu mwaka gw'ebyensimbi 2024-2025 ebyenfuna byakula ku bitundu 6 n'obutundutundu 3 buli 100 okuva ku bitundu 6 n'akatundutundu kamu buli 100 mwaka gw'ebyensimbi 2023-2024 era nga enkulaakulana eno yeesigamiziddwa kubeera nti enkyukakyuka y'emiwendo gy'ebintu ebadde wansi ddala. Essiringi ya Uganda ebadde yenywezezza ebintu by'ettunda ebweru w'eggwanga era nga gavana bw'anokoddeyo emmwanyi n'anokolayo ne kokowa n'alaga nti nayo byeyongeredde ddala ate n'ensiga ya gavumenti ennungi ey'ensimbi naddala mu by'entambula oba mu luzungu kye tuyita infrastructure. Bwe bakubye tooki mu maaso ebyenkulaakulana bijja kuba wakati w'ebitundu 6 n'ebitundu 6 n'obutundutundu 5 buli 100 mwaka gw'ebyensimbi 2025-2026 era nga balaga nti mu myaka giri emirala 27 weeyongere waggulu bijja kuba nga byeyongerera ddala okulongooka nga kino kyesigamiziddwa ku nkola ey'emirumu emirungi mu banka enkulu ya Uganda gye twayise monetary policy, gavumenti enteekateeka za gavumenti ez'enjawulo ezijja okutumbula ebyenfuna, ebyobulimi ebyongera okulongooka ate n'ensimbi ezisigibwa mu kuyiikuula ebyobugagga eby'omu ttaka, ebyo byonna nga byesigamiziddwa kye twakazaako 10-fold growth strategy. N'alaga nti okutwaliza awamu ebyenfuna biyinza okuziŋŋamamu singa ebintu bye tutunda ebweru w'eggwanga ebbeeyi yaabyo yeeyongera singa egwa wabeerawo obutabanguko mu ntambula y'ebintu ebyo era anokoddeyo nti singa bannaffe mu kyombo kya Bwarabu bali wabeeramu obuzibu emmeeri ziyinza okuba nga zeetaaga okutambula olugendo oluwanvu okusiyaguuka okwo ne kuleeta ebbeeyi y'ebintu okwambukira ddala. N'ayongera nti singa obwetaavu bw'ensimbi nabwo bweyongera okuba nga buli kazigizigi kiyinza okuleetamu obuzibu mu byenfuna awamu n'embeera y'obudde singa eba etabanguse. N'ayogera nti ebyenfuna bino biyinza okukula ku sipiidi eya wagguluko singa obutabanguko buliwo mu mawanga bukendeera, essente eziteekebwa mu byentambula oba mu infrastructure zeeyongera ate n'abantu okulongoosa mu nkola y'emirimu oba business sentiments ne zeeyongera okulongookamu nga tweyongera mu maaso. Gavana n'awunzika ng'agamba nti okutwaliza awamu akakiiko kasazeewo kakuumire amagoba ge twakazaako central bank rate ku bitundu 9.75 buli 100 nga kino balaba amagoba gano gayina obusobozi okusigala nga gakkanyiza enkyukakyuka y'emiwendo gy'ebintu awamu n'okutumbula ebyenfuna n'ekikula ky'abantu mu nsi yonna eya Uganda. N'alambula nti enkyukakyuka yonna enaaba ekoleddwa mu magoba gano ejja kusinziira ku bwino gwe banaaba bafunye ate n'okwekenneenya okw'akakiiko kano engeri y'ebyenfuna gye binaaba bitambulamu. Byebyo mu bufunze gavana byayogeddeko. Mwebale kutuwuliriza.
Tweyanziza nnyo Mwami Sonko. Wabaddewo ebibuuzo bye babuuzizza gavana. Oyinza okuddamu oyinza okubyogera nga bw'abyogedde nga bw'abizzeemu mu bufunze.
Ebibuuzo bye mutubuuzizza oba mubuuzizza gavana olwo mu lukiiko ekyasoose kyabadde kukuba nti lwaki siringi ya Uganda yenywezezza bw'ogigeraageranya n'ez'amawanga amalala. Gavana anokoddeyo ensonga zibadde 5. Esooka nti okutwaliza awamu ebintu by'ettunda ebweru w'eggwanga era naawe ekyokulabirako eky'emmwanyi ne kokowa n'alaga nti eyo ebbeeyi yaabyo katale k'ensi yonna yeeyongedde n'anokolayo n'ekira nti n'obungi bw'emmwanyi bwe tutunda ebweru w'eggwanga nabwo bweyongedde era n'alaga nti okutwaliza awamu ebyo bituwaddeyo obuwumbi 2 ne miliyoni 10 eza ddoola eziyingidde mu byenfuna byatuuse ekyo kyeyongeddeko obungi bwa ddoola mu byenfuna. N'anokolayo ekirala nti enkola y'emirimu emirungi oba mu luzungu kye tuyise prudent monetary policy eya banka enkulu ya Uganda eyo naye yeeyongedde okusika bamusigansimbi abateeka ssente mu kuwola gavumenti mu nkola gye twakazaako treasury bills ne treasury bonds. N'ayongeramu nti ne banka enkulu ya Uganda yateekawo ennongoosereza mu katale k'ebyensimbi n'anokolayo kye tuyise swap market, ng'ekyo kiyambako okujja ebbugumu mu katale akaakagwirawo oba kyayise mu lufuutifuuti spot market, ne kiyambako abeetaaga ddoola ogenda nga bazijja oba nga bazigula ku bbanga eggwanvuko. N'alengerako nti bwe tutunuuliza okutwaliza awamu n'obungi bw'abantu abeetaaga okuteeka ssente mu kuwola gavumenti obwo nabwo bweyongeddeko, ate n'anokolayo n'ensonga ey'okutaano nti ne ddoola naye yeeyongedde okunafuwa bw'ogigeraageranya ku nsimbi z'amawanga amalala gannaggwadda okutwaliza awamu. So kyekyo ekibuuzo ekisoose. Ekyokubiri, waliwo yadde abuuzizza nti lwaki gavumenti yalese siringi ku mmeeza mu kwewola mu katale okwasembyeyo. Gavana n'alambulula nti okutwaliza awamu mmwe abantu abagula oba abawola gavumenti mu abasalawo amagoba kwe mwolerako gavumenti, naye kikikatakako ne gavumenti okulaba ki amagoba ge yandiyagadde okusasula, n'olw'ensonga bw'eraba nga mugalinnyisizza nnyo esobola okutta ku bigere n'etwala ssente z'esobola okuzzaayo amagoba. Naye gavana atangaazizza nti waliwo enteekateeka ey'okuleetawo bonds ez'enjawulo, anokoddeyo diaspora bond, scook bond, green bond awamu ne infrastructure bond. Naye n'alambika nti diaspora bond ejja kwetaaga okuteekawo diaspora policy okusobola okuluŋŋamya enkola okuwola okwo gwe kunaatambulirako. Gavana anokoddeyo ku bikwata ku gold purchase program oba okugula kwa zaabu, n'agamba nti kuno kugenda kubeera enteekateeka enaasookerwako oba kyayise mu lufuutifuuti pilot project ekinaamala wakati w'emyaka 2 ku 3, era n'alambika nti enteekateeka eyo yatambuzibwa dda oba procurement yaayo yakolebwa, era tunaatera okutandika okutambula bwetyo. Naye ng'ekisingamu kyanokoddeyo nti emyaka egyo 2 ku 3 banka enkulu ya Uganda ejja kubaako byegenda ng'eyiga mu katale ka zaabu mu Uganda esobole okweyongera okulongoosa. N'anokolayo nti ku switch, national payment switch, tukyali kyayise consultation, tukyali mu kubuuliriza okw'enjawulo, era ekyo kitwala obudde, n'olw'ensonga eyo okubuuliriza okwe kunaaba kuwedde, tujja kusobola okuteekawo national switch. Waliwo yabuuzizza ku kya One Beautiful Bill oba One Beautiful Act. Ekyo balaze nti okutwaliza awamu kiyinza okubeerako engeri gye kikosaamu ebyenfuna, naye nga nakyo tusobola okukifunamu okusinziira bwe kinaaba kirambuluddwa mu byenfuna bya Amerika, kubanga lino etteeka omukulembeze wa Amerika Donald Trump lye yabagawo, era nga ligenda kuleetawo obwetaavu bwa ddoola obutabalika 3 n'obuwumbi 4 mu byenfuna bya Amerika obuyinza okuba nga bujja kwetaaga, naye singa bireeta okukulaakulana mu byenfuna bya Amerika, ekyo kijja kuyambako okuba nga obutale obulala buteekayo ebyabyo. So kiyinza okubeerako enjuyi zombi, era gavana watyo n'agamba nti bwino anaaba akivuddemu kwe tunaasinziira okweteekateeka. Waliwo yabuuzizza nti okutwaliza awamu tukuba ttooki mu nkyukakyuka y'embeera y'obudde nga tuteekateeka ebyensimbi, era gavana n'alambula nti mu mirimu gyombi banka enkulu eza Uganda zeevunaanyizibwako okutebenkeza banka n'okulaba nti enkyukakyuka y'emiwendo gy'ebintu tenaabuuka, ebyo eby'embeera by'obudde biteekebwamu, era ng'okutwaliza awamu twakatunuulira mu monetary policy takatunulira obungi bw'enkuba n'ebbugumu eri mu by'embeera y'obudde ne biteekebwamu, n'anokolayo n'okuba nti tutaddewo mu lufuutifuuti kye tuyise guidelines mu byensimbi oba mu banka ez'ebyobusuubuzi okusobola okubalambika engeri gye banaawolamu ssente oba gye banaakolamu emirimu gyabwe nga batunuulidde embeera y'obudde. Waliwo eyanokoddeyo ekya mobile money. Gavana alambuludde nti ekyo tujja kweyongera okunoonyereza nga banka enkulu eya Uganda okutuusa lwe tunaatuuka wawe kiva, naye n'alambulira bannayuganda nti bw'oba ofunye obutategeeragana ne mobile money, sooka ogende eri provider bw'onaavaayo nga toli mukakafu oba toli mumativu ku kyakuwadde oyinza okwekubira endulu mu banka enkulu eya Uganda n'osobola okufuna okuyambibwa. Ekisembyeyo gavana kyanokoddeyo bibadde bibiri, ayogoddeko ku by'okulonda ebibindabinda n'agamba nti okutwaliza awamu abayingira mu byobufuzi bw'oba osazeewo okutunda ebintu ebikalu tolina nnyo ngeri gy'oyongeramu bungi bwa ssente mu ggwanga oba ozijje mu maka gamu n'oziteeka mu maka amalala, n'olw'ensonga ekyo tekijja kukosa nnyo kyukakyuka ya miwendo gy'ebintu okutwaliza awamu. N'alambika nti ne gavumenti yafulumya mu bajeti yayo ebyensimbi 2025-2026 ensaasanya yaayo ku by'obukulembeze oba ku by'obululu ebijja mu maaso, n'olw'ensonga ebyo byonna oyo bwino yenna twamuteeka dda mu nteekateeka ya banka enkulu eya Uganda, era bannayuganda batuule nga bakkakkamu tekijja kukosa nkyukakyuka y'amandu gy'abintu. Waliwo eyabuuzizza ku magezi gano agaakajjawo oba ge bayise artificial intelligence. Gavana n'alambula nti strategy ya banka enkulu eya Uganda oba enteekateeka namutayiika ebyo ebikwataganako bwe bityo yabitunuulira dda era n'ebiteekamu ngeri ki gye binaakolamu oba gye bitunaabikwataganyaamu mu strategy ya 2022-2027. Naye n'alambulula n'akakasa bannayuganda nti bwino yenna anaava ku bintu ebyo era ajja kutunuulibwa singa anaaba yeetaagiddwa okutunuulibwa nga tuteeka enteekateeka eyo ey'ebyensimbi. So okutwaliza wamu olukiiko bwe lutyo bwe lugenze.
Yanziza nnyo, tukomye awo, mwebale kuwuliriza.